The damp air of Liverpool clung to the streets on the morning of October 23, 2006. The McKenna family wandered the avenues one last time, carrying that sweet exhaustion that comes with moving away from the city's noisy center. 5-year-old Ryan was strolling along, swinging his mother's hand, when he suddenly jolted to a halt in front of a shop window, as if he had slammed into an invisible wall. His eyes seemed imprisoned within a black and white poster. The members of the Beatles stared back at him from a frozen slice of time. Ryan extended a trembling finger toward the face behind the glass John Lennon. His voice was filled not with childish excitement, but with the quiet recognition of seeing an old friend. "Mom, look, this is me." Sarah smiled at her son's strange claim of ownership, yet a peculiar shiver ran down her spine. "Ryan, honey, that's one of the Beatles. A musician from a long time ago." Ryan tilted his head, his gaze never wavering from the eyes of the man in the poster. "No, Mom," he said, his voice carrying a calmness unexpected for his age. "This is me. I used to be very famous, and I had a beautiful guitar. I remember it. I know how my fingers used to touch those strings." Sarah's legs gave way, and she practically collapsed into the first chair she could find. No Beatles music was ever played in their house. Their record player spun only old recordings from local bands. How did Ryan recognize this face? And how could he describe the feeling of being famous from such a profound inner perspective? Years later, when the subject came up again while Ryan was sitting with his father, the boy looked at him with an ease, as if speaking of a distant dream. "I knew you long before I saw this photo, Dad. Your face was just a little different back then." Then, he slid his finger to another figure on the poster, Paul McCartney. A look washed over his face, one belonging to a man remembering a long and grueling day at work. "Keep this photo. The weather was unbearably hot that day, and Paul was as annoying as ever. He was constantly trying to control everything." Mother and father were buried in a deep silence. In the mind of a 5-year-old child, where did this annoying intimacy regarding not just Paul McCartney's name, but his very personality come from? In that moment, the room felt filled not with the child's imagination, but with the weary memories of a restless soul. "I know where I hid certain things," Ryan said one evening, leafing through an old book in his lap. His gaze wasn't on the pages, but seemingly on the dusty shelves of 50 years ago, especially those private journals that others aren't meant to read. Sarah approached her son, pressing her trembling hands against her knees. As if sensing the storm inside his mother, Ryan placed his hand over hers. His touch belonged less to a child and more to a comforting friend. "Everything is fine, Mom. One day you will believe me. I promise you." These words would, years later, be recorded as the most shocking case in reincarnation literature. Proof of the human soul shining in another body like an inextinguishable light after death. But for the McKenna family, those days were only the first tremors of a jarring discovery. In the weeks that followed, the silence of the house was broken by complex melodies that Ryan began to hum. Those melancholic tones, which seemed impossible to pour from the throat of a 5-year-old, echoed against the walls. Sarah, holding her breath, asked, "Ryan, where did you hear that beautiful song?" Ryan smiled as if answering the most ordinary question in the world. "I didn't hear it, Mom. I wrote these. Back when I was a grown --up. Back in those years when I was very famous." The true breaking point happened during a family dinner. Ryan stopped abruptly while racing his toy cars on the table. His voice completely stripped away the high-pitched chirp of his preschool playmates. In its place settled the characteristic, slightly gritty and deep accent of 1960s Liverpool. He was no longer a child talking. He was a man speaking from inside a time machine. "I used to live in a big white house with Yoko," he whispered, lining up the cars as if parking them at the front door of a home. "She had long black hair. It was as if she carried a piece of the night on her back. and she always dressed in pure white. The sound of the spoon falling from Sarah's hand shattered the heavy silence in the room. She practically bolted from the table, unable to stop the trembling in her voice. "Ryan, what are these words? Who is this Yoko?" Ryan raised his head. In that moment, an old, weary, and longing-filled soul appeared, trapped inside that 5-year-old body. He looked not at his mother, but as if addressing someone on the other side of the world. "She was my wife, Mom. I miss her more than anything." The true chilling moment was the second the button on the stereo was pressed. Michael started "Here Comes the Sun" with the cold composure of an experiment. The moment the melody drifted through the room, Ryan lunged as if he were in physical pain. He slumped over the stereo, looking as though he wanted to tear the music apart with his bare hands. "Turn it off. Turn it off now," he shouted, his voice raspy and furious. "George is playing my guitar. I shouldn't have let him take it." The McKenna family felt the air being sucked out of the room. How could a 5-year-old know that the guitar on that track belonged to George Harrison, and even more, that the guitar was actually Lennon's, a personal gift? Ryan began to sob, shaken by the profound grief of an adult. The words that spilled through his hiccups turned the room to ice. "I wrote that song. No, I wrote that feeling. I wrote it for Julian. It was for my son." Sarah took Ryan into her arms, but the child in her embrace was no longer just a child. He was an old soul whose instruments, voice, and life had been stolen. "Mom, why can't I play my instruments?" Ryan asked, burying his head in Sarah's neck. "Where are my guitars? Where is my pure white piano? Why is everything so small?" On the morning of November 18th, in a final act of hope to reach a resolution, Sarah took her son to the Liverpool Beatles Museum. Her belief was simple. The facts would shatter Ryan's fantasy and turn him back into a child again. But the moment they walked through the doors, her plan turned to dust. Ryan moved through the thousands of tourists without a moment's hesitation, as if walking through the hallways of his own home. In the first exhibition hall, he let go of his mother's hand and ran toward a famous display case, drawn as if by a magnetic force. He pressed his small fingers against the glass. The tears streaming from his eyes mingled with the shimmer of the 12-string Rickenbacker. "This is mine," he cried out, his voice filled with both triumph and profound pain. "I bought it in New York in 1964. I remember, it had just come out of the box, ... Then he pointed to the very bottom corner of the case. "Look, there's a scratch right here. I made it myself that day while putting it back in its case." Sarah leaned toward the glass. She couldn't see it. At that moment, no one knew a scratch existed there. Years later, when restorers confirmed under magnifying glasses that there truly was a mark at that exact spot, that display case would become more than just a museum exhibit. It would be the return certificate of a soul. The museum guide, Thomas Mitchell, approached the case with professional curiosity. "Little friend," he said gently, "this is John Lennon's guitar, but there isn't a single scratch on it. It's pristine." Ryan turned to the man, his eyes tearful, but his gaze as hard as steel. His voice had completely lost its childish ring. "Yes, there is, right under the second string. It happened when I dropped it at Abbey Road Studios during the Norwegian Wood recording session. I can still hear that sound." It made my heart ache. A chill ran down Thomas's spine. This detail existed in no official record. It was a secret known only to the 4 men in that studio and the sound engineers. Ryan didn't stop there. He headed toward a black and white photograph of the Cavern Club, moving as though he were walking down a hallway he had traversed thousands of times. He wasn't just looking at the photo. He was living it. "We played here 292 times, he murmured, his fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. The stage was so small we could taste each other's sweat. Paul was always complaining about the smell." Sarah approached her son, trembling. Her voice could barely rise above a whisper. "Ryan, how do you know these things?" Ryan replied simply, "Because I was there, Mom." Pointing to the edge of the photo, he added, "Look, I used to leave my harmonica right here. Pete Best would bump into it when he walked by and move it out of place. It used to drive me crazy." Thomas Mitchell had dedicated his life to Beatles history, but he had never heard a word about that harmonica corner. "What else, ... he said, swallowing hard. "Can you tell me?" Ryan looked at him with the gravity of an adult. "The toilet was always broken. We'd be out of breath climbing those steep stairs to get out. And Brian ... Brian says he discovered us on November 9th, 1961, but that's a lie. He had seen us before. He just acted like it was the first time that day to show off. On that cold night in December 2006, everything grew even heavier. Ryan began to bolt upright in his sleep every night at exactly 3:17, a haunting nod to the moment Lennon died. He would sit in bed, moving his fingers as if an imaginary guitar were in his lap. The melodies he hummed belonged neither to the Beatles nor anyone else. Yet every note, every rhythm carried the soul of John Lennon. One night, Sarah left a tape recorder in Ryan's room. What was heard on that recording was not just a child's voice. That night, a genius leaking from the afterworld was trying to finish his incomplete symphony. The melody drifting from Ryan's room was not just a song. It was like the cry of a soul lost in a garden of glass. The song was titled Lucy's Dream. As Ryan's voice told the story of that girl searching for her way home through crystal flowers, it vibrated with that characteristic Lennon vibrato, impossible for a 5-year-old's throat. Made Michael. McKenna's hair stand on end. Michael's hands were shaking as he sent the recording to Dr. James Harrison at the University of Liverpool. When the reply arrived 48 hours later, the air in the room practically froze. Dr. Harrison's lines felt less like an academic analysis and more like a confession. "Dear Mr. McKenna, the composition you sent is not just professional. It is of the nature of a historical document." In Paul McCartney's private journal from 1963, there is a faint note about a legendary Crystal Gardens song that John threw away for being too personal. How did this song climb out of that trash can and find its way into your hands? For the McKenna family, silence was no longer a sanctuary. It was a prison. Their 5-year-old son was humming a destroyed memory from 43 years ago as if he had composed it just last night. But Ryan wasn't stopping. In the following nights, the lost treasures of music history appeared one by one at the edge of Ryan's bed. Strawberry Mine, Julia's Lullaby, Penny Lane Backwards. Each was a sophisticated and melancholic masterpiece that matched, line for line, the unfinished fragments seen by only a handful of scholars in private archives. Dr. Harrison's final email had completely lost its academic composure. These recordings could redefine not the history of the Beatles, but the very boundaries of the human soul. "I need to meet the owner of this voice immediately." In that moment, when Sarah entered her son's room, she found Ryan sitting cross-legged in the middle of his bed, writing lyrics on an imaginary piece of paper. Ryan looked up, his eyes shining as if illuminated by a light filtering through the smoky studios of 1963. "Mom, Paul really liked the songs, but he says they aren't ready for them yet." That night, as Sarah hugged her son's body, she felt as though she were clinging to a tombstone. Ryan was no longer just a musician. He was a prophet, the vessel of a soul composing its own end. As Ryan stroked his mother's hair, his voice was as cold and haunting as a winter wind. "Mom, there are more songs. They keep spinning inside my mind, but they are so sad. They talk about how I will leave, about that dark street, about that cold gun." But the true storm broke on the morning of December 2nd. It was 5:30 in the morning. Dawn had not yet broken. Ryan woke up, convulsing with sobs. It was as if he were losing his breath. "Where is Yoko?" Why isn't she coming to find me? She promised we would always be together. Sarah pressed him to her chest, but Ryan's eyes were locked on the void. Why isn't she here, with me? He moaned. Her hair is as black as the night, and she always wears snow-white dresses. We wait for the sunlight in our massive house with so many windows. Why did she leave me in this lonely room? In the afternoon, as if wanting to complete a master plan, Ryan grabbed his colored pencils. For 45 minutes, he drew that room with a geometric precision that surpassed any child's imagination. Giant floor-to-ceiling windows, a white grand piano standing noble like a swan in the very heart of the room, and a circular bed. Ryan placed his finger on the drawing, his voice sounding like a nostalgia-filled guide. This is our sanctuary. The piano is in this exact corner because I love it when the notes I play touch the trees in Central Park. Yoko always sits in this chair while I play. Sometimes we just listen to each other breathe. Then he pointed to a dark corner of the picture. And here is the machine where we recorded Double Fantasy. That noisy box that imprisons music forever, ... single quotes. Michael's hands trembled as he held the drawing, unable to swallow as he stared at that flawless architectural perspective. A child's imagination is usually scattered. Yet this drawing felt like the calcified memory of a lived-in space. That night, bathed in the glow of the computer screen as he looked at interior photos of the Dakota building, every frame he saw pierced his heart like a spear. The angle of the white piano facing Central Park, the circular bed, the arrangement of the flower pots, ... Everything was identical to what had flowed from Ryan's pencil. But the most chilling detail was that small table. Records confirmed that John and Yoko had turned that exact corner of the room into a home studio to work on the Double Fantasy album. Ryan hadn't just drawn the furniture. He had captured the frantic spirit of those final working days. The following day, the heavy silence of the dentist's waiting room was shattered by Ryan's outcry. A small black and white photo of Yoko Ono in the corner of a magazine was like a wound opened in time. When Ryan pressed the magazine to his chest and collapsed to the floor, the breath of everyone in the waiting room caught. That's her. That's her. The boy sobbed, his fingers trembling over the photograph. That's my Yoko. Mom, call her, please. Tell her John is here. Tell her he's waiting for her. Under the bewildered gaze of the receptionist, Ryan kissed the photo repeatedly, as if trying to bring it to life, whispering, "Why aren't you coming? We promised we would never be apart." His voice was not that of a child, but of a lover who had been waiting for 50 years, filled with the crushing weight of abandonment. As Sarah scooped her son into her arms and fled the room, Ryan's sobs echoed off the concrete walls of the parking lot. In the car, still clutching the magazine as he tried to fasten his seatbelt, Ryan looked into his mother's eyes and shattered her world once more. She's so sad, Mom. She thinks I'm dead, that I'm gone forever. But I'm here. I'm waiting for her. We're going home tomorrow, aren't we? We're going to New York. She needs to know I've come back. 3 weeks later, on Christmas Eve 2006, the McKenna family made the most difficult decision of their lives. Using their life savings, they bought 3 plane tickets to New York. This was no vacation. It was a desperate quest for answers. Ryan hadn't stopped crying since the incident at the dentist's. Every day he asked when they were going home to find Yoko. Mentally and emotionally drained, his parents decided that taking him to the Dakota building was the only way to end this nightmare once and for all. The flight from Liverpool to New York lasted 8 hours. Ryan remained silent throughout the journey, staring out the window. Occasionally, he would murmur, "We're almost home," or "Yoko will be so happy to see me." But once they landed at JFK Airport, something happened that turned his parents to ice. Ryan, who had never been to New York and had never seen a map of the city, began giving precise directions to the taxi driver. Take the FDR Drive to 79th Street, then turn left onto Central Park West. Our home is at 1 West 72nd Street. "You're new. I don't know you. Where's Harold?" "Harold always greets me when I arrive." The doorman felt a chill. Harold had been the doorman of the Dakota in the 1970s and had passed away in 1995. Only longtime residents or obsessed Lennon fans knew this detail. With a trembling voice, the doorman asked, "Kid, how do you know Harold?" Ryan looked at him with eyes full of nostalgia. "When Yoko and I came home late at night, he always took care of me. He'd give me mint candies and ask about my songs." The doorman was speechless. The details Ryan mentioned about Harold were absolutely correct, but it was impossible for a 5-year-old child from Liverpool to know them. Ryan stepped toward the cold stones of the Dakota like a pilgrim approaching the walls of a sanctuary. When he placed his small hand on the memorial plaque by the door, an electric charge seemed to spread through the building from his fingertips. His lips began to move as if in prayer. Yet his whisper was not the whim of a child, but the testament of a bard. Suddenly, the heavy silence hanging in the air was shattered by a voice. But this was not the high, thin voice Ryan used in preschool. The voice echoing through the arched entrance of the Dakota was shaped in the streets of 1960s Liverpool, steeped in cigarette smoke and melancholy, that distinct, mature, nasal tone. "Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try." Sarah felt her legs give way. Michael, holding his breath, pulled out his phone and began to record this miracle or this nightmare with trembling hands. As Ryan sang, he exhibited technical perfection. Lennon's famous breath intervals, his pauses, and the way he rolled each syllable in his mouth were in millimetric alignment. Yet the most terrifying part was the emotion in the song. As the tears streaming down Ryan's cheeks splashed onto the stone floor, it felt as though he wasn't speaking of a heaven, but of a world he had lost. When the song ended, Ryan collapsed onto the concrete, as if that massive soul inside him was too much for his small body to hold. His sobs echoed through the void of the building as he clung to his mother. His murmur reverted to the fear of a child. "I don't want to sing that song anymore. Mom... It scares me so much. Whenever I sing it, I feel the coldness of that dark night and that gun all over again. Please, don't take me there." The Dakota doorman leaned against the stone wall, wiping the sweat from his face with shaking hands. In 30 years, he had seen thousands of John Lennon impersonators and hundreds of ghost hunters. But this child wasn't wearing a mask. "This isn't an imitation," he whispered, his voice quivering. "This child isn't singing like him. He has become the song itself." That night, in the dim light of the hotel room, Michael and Sarah replayed the recording over and over as if listening to a sacred ritual. Michael sent the file to Dr. Harrison without any technical explanation. The email that arrived 6 hours later sucked all the warmth out of the room. "Dear Mr. McKenna, I have analyzed this recording. The vocal structure, the famous gaps between the vocal cords, these are identical to Lennon in 1971. But the truly terrifying thing isn't the spectrographic result. It's the interpretation itself. This emotional emphasis is in millimetric harmony with a mournful version Lennon recorded secretly in his room at the Dakota 2 weeks before his death. That recording was never released. The only copy sits in Yoko Ono's steel safe. Explain to me the owner of this voice immediately." Sarah felt her fingers turn to ice as she read the email. Her son had inherited not just the voice of a legend, but the final, heavy melancholy of a man who knew he was going to die. On the morning of December 26th, at 4:17, the silence of the room was shattered by a scream ripped from Ryan's throat. When his parents rushed to his side, they found Ryan in cold sweats, his eyes locked on the void. His gaze held the terror not of a child, but of a victim. "Mom," Ryan whispered, his voice as uncanny as a winter wind. "I saw that man again. The man who is going to hurt me." Sarah tried to calm him. "It was just a nightmare, honey," she said. But Ryan's response was as hard as a tombstone. Not a nightmare, Mom, a memory. A bulky man with thick glasses. He has a book in his hand. He wants me to sign it, but his eyes. There is only rage and darkness in those eyes. Michael, holding his breath, asked, Ryan, what was the book in the man's hand? It was a book about me, Ryan said, trembling as if reliving the moment. He was murmuring terrible things as I signed it. Then he pulled something shining from his coat, and I felt that massive burning pain in my back. Everywhere became so cold, Mom. Everywhere became so dark. Michael and Sarah were locked in the grip of terror. Neither Mark David Chapman's name had ever been mentioned in their house, nor had the records of that sinister murder been watched. Yet Ryan was recounting the texture of that evening, not from the mouth of a witness, but from the aching memory of the victim himself. Do you remember that day, Ryan? Michael asked, his voice drifting through the room like a whisper. It was December 8th, Ryan said, shivering as he felt that past cold in his marrow again. The air was a tooth-cutting cold. I had my black coat on. Yoko and I had been recording all afternoon. Yoko was tired, ... Her voice was sleepy, and she wanted to have dinner right away. Ryan's fingers moved as if buttoning an imaginary coat. I told her to wait. There's a kid waiting downstairs, I said. I'll give him an autograph and be right back. Sarah's heart began to beat rapidly. The words spilling from Ryan's mouth were in millimetric alignment with the documented testimonies hidden in history's dusty archives. When Ryan wiped the tears from his eyes, he looked at Michael with a heavy regret that no child of that age could possess. I remember kissing Yoko and telling her I loved her right before stepping out that door to give the autograph. I had a bad feeling, Dad, as if the air had grown very heavy. But I thought it was just my imagination from being tired. Ryan paused for a moment. Even the ticking of the clock in the room seemed to stop. If only, he whispered, his voice coming from deep within, as if echoing through a time tunnel. If only I had listened to that voice from the depths of my soul. That voice that said, don't go down. It was the moment time stood still. On December 29th, 2006, the imposing oak doors of the Dakota building were opened by the hands of 73-year-old Yoko Ono. When she heard those lost melodies from Dr. Harrison, Yoko's frozen grief had finally cracked. Standing before her now was a 5-year-old child who walked through the apartment he had been drawing for months, not like a stranger, but like the master of the house. When Ryan entered the main hall, he saw the woman waiting for him with her silver-streaked hair and smoky eyes. In that moment, the room was filled not with the cold light of the winter sun, but with the fire of a 50-year longing. Ryan stood as if carrying the weight of a giant on his small shoulders. His voice whispered like a wind coming from thousands of years away. Yoko, my love, I missed you so much. The protective armor on Yoko's face shattered into 1,000 pieces in a single second. This gaze, the compassionate depth behind those boyish eyes, was the exact mirror of the gaze John had given her on that final evening before he left. Ryan approached slowly, cradling Yoko's trembling hands in his small ones like a hidden treasure. Why are those rains still in your eyes? I can see it, Yoko. You haven't been able to stop the tears since I left. Why have you left yourself so lonely in this house? Yoko could not suppress her sobs. In the last 26 years, she had known millions of fans and thousands of friends, but no one had touched that mute pain in the deepest corner of her soul with such a bare hand. Ryan turned his eyes toward the most noble corner of the salon. Is our white piano still there? Will you let me finish that composition I left incomplete for you? Ryan sat at the piano. He was barely tall enough to reach the keys, but his fingers began to trace arcs over them, as if there were an ancient agreement between ivory and bone. No one had ever heard that melody before. It was melancholic, dreamlike, and bore an indisputable John Lennon signature. Yoko, my eternal dream, he whispered as he sang. Even death cannot divide what we are. Yoko collapsed into the leather chair right beside him, the exact same chair John loved to sit in while composing, a detail unknown to anyone else. When Ryan finished playing, he didn't rise from the piano. Leaning against its cold whiteness, he left in Yoko's ear that final burning secret that a woman would keep for a lifetime. Do you still keep my last letter? The one I gave you the day before I left? Those lines where I promised that if anything happened to me, I would return and find you no matter the cost, just to prove the eternity of our love? Yoko looked at Ryan, her breath hitching in her throat. Her gaze wavered between a child's innocence and a giant's terror. That letter, the scrap of paper John hadn't even revealed to his son Sean, hidden in the darkest corner of his steel safe, it truly existed. How do you know about that letter? She asked, her voice trembling like glass cracking. Ryan smiled with 1,000-year-old sorrow on his lips. Because I wrote it, my love, he said, his voice stopping all time in the room at that moment. I gave you my word. That oath I swore that I would return no matter what. Well, I've come to keep my promise. For the next 20 minutes, Ryan and Yoko were immersed in a privacy that defied the logic of life. When the McKennas were called back into the room, they found not the woman who had lived in the shadow of grief for 26 years, but someone else entirely, with a sacred light mixed with awe in her eyes. Ryan told me things only John and I knew, Yoko said, her voice filled with a peace unheard of for decades. He laid out our most intimate conversations, secrets I kept only in the deepest part of my heart. One by one before me, Ryan walked slowly to his mother and father, taking their ice-cold hands in his small ones. The voice pouring from this 5-year-old boy was now like a farewell note to all of humanity. Mom, Dad, ... I finally know why I'm here and why I chose to come back. His voice held the gravity not of a victim, but of an architect. In those final days when I was John, there was one last song I wanted to record. That composition that echoed in the depths of my heart, but was left unfinished the moment I stepped out that door ... It's called The Bridge Between Worlds. It was about death being not an end, but just a stop, about how love outlasts flesh and bone. I came back because I couldn't allow my soul to find peace on the other side without completing that work. Ryan took one final step toward the piano. The moment his fingers touched the ivory keys, every object in the room seemed to fall silent to make space for the melody. The notes poured out with a supernatural clarity, spreading through the apartment's hallways like a crystal river. As Ryan began the song, the timbre of a child completely gave way to that smoky, nasal, and melancholy-drenched legendary voice of 1980. The song lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Not a second less, not a second more. It was as if time itself had flowed with millimetric precision to restore the moments John had lost that day. When Ryan finished playing, his gaze swept over everyone in the room with a heavy sacredness. This song must reach the world. This is my unfinished farewell, my final message. I reached out from that side to complete what I swore to finish. Yoko, gathering all the strength in her legs, approached him and embraced him as if he were the only real entity in the universe. More than a child's body in her arms, he was that lost sanctuary she had been seeking for 26 years. John ... My John, the old woman sobbed. How much longer will I be able to feel your breath? How long can you stay with me? Ryan looked at her with those unforgettable eyes, containing both the joy of a Christmas morning and the sorrow of an autumn evening. Not much longer, my love, he said, his voice trembling. I can feel the thin bond between this body and this soul loosening. The experience is nearing its end. But I want you to make a promise before I go. This song must be recorded. Let it remain in the world as my final legacy proof that true love does not end with a physical finale, but continues through an evolution to another universe, that it never dies. 3 months later, on one of Liverpool's cool mornings, the lights of that massive library in Ryan McKenna's mind began to go out one by one. That mature, steeped, and mournful man gradually gave way to toy cars, nursery songs, and the joy of an ordinary 5-year-old boy from Liverpool. John's memories faded slowly, like the morning mist dissolving with the sun. However, when that miraculous room performance, The Bridge Between Worlds, was served to the world with professional meticulousness, modern music history was shaken. In that historic statement made in the final stages of her life, Yoko Ono said, her voice never wavering, "26 years later, I spoke with John again through the eyes of a child." Ryan McKenna brought back not just John's melodies, but his conscience and his love. The rest of my life is no longer a farewell, but the certification of a reunion. Even today, the most rigid scientists and musicologists cannot explain how a child could access these intimate details. The case stands as the most unshakable monument of paranormal literature. Ryan is now an ordinary adolescent building his own life. He no longer speaks of that harmonica or the stone stairs of the Dakota. But sometimes, when he hears a melody reminiscent of those misty winter days in New York, his gaze locks onto the distance. In his heart, an inexplicable longing wakes, along with the ache of an ancient love for a woman he doesn't remember knowing. Listening to those melodies he doesn't recall, unaware that his soul once walked among giants, he simply smiles. Was Ryan McKenna's final memory, as John Lennon, a warning from beyond time, or the completion of an unfinished farewell? This case proves once again that truth can be far more haunting than fiction. If you enjoy documented true stories that push the boundaries of the human mind, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our journey into the unknown. We'll see you in the next mystery ...